Let me also record.
I think it's a bit more difficult, just that there's many things to like keep track of, and using the different syntax, like with the SQL stuff, and it's all new, so just trying to learn it and keep it straight and put it in the put the right punctuation where it needs to go and stuff is tricky.
I think with SQL you have the issue that there are very small details on the query, so on the string that you prepare, that may provoke an error, and you have to, you don't know very easy where the error is, because you just get an error like incorrect, I don't know, parse error, typical parse error, because, I don't know, instead of double quotes, you used single quotes, or you had to use double quotes and you use single quotes. Or the one I was checking now, I think it was yours, Jacqueline. I was checking that you.
I couldn't get any of them to work, honestly. And I feel like I was kind of close, but I don't know.
So this one is really, this one, the ones that they break your nerves, but it was just, I will show you where the error is, so that you know, because I think you have it correct and everything. So you can see my screen. And this one is the one I was trying now to debug, because it was really hard to understand where the error was. So here on this insert, this I has an accent for some reason.
Okay.
Okay, so
Oh my gosh.
the SQL doesn't understand this letter or whatever. You have to write it. But yeah, so it's very hard to see, because then you get, there is something wrong with a string, but you don't know exactly like where the error is. And the string, if you just look and look and look at it, it seems okay. But
yeah, I think I have a Spanish keyboard, so when I do the backtick, it makes an accent on the next vowel. So
yes. So this one is the one that triggers an error, but there is also, for example, an error here, because you have this part in between quotes, and this is supposed to be like a true, false, or a 0-1. It doesn't have to be passed as a string, so
okay,
you have to like remove the quotes from here, but the rest is perfect. So it's a very good starting point. I don't know if you had, I didn't get to the rest. Probably here, maybe it would be the same. So on the complete, that you don't have to use the quotes.
okay.
So there are small things like this with SQL that you have to be careful, but the rest, I think they were all great. I think also on the ID probably doesn't need any quotes. So when you deal with numbers, you don't need to use the quotes around that. I will. It was good. You did great. Let me try. I will just continue from where we were. So I will start them. Let me start this so that we solve this first part.
Can I ask a little question?
Yes.
When searching, like Googling, to check like the queries, what is it that we should actually like look for, like SQL and Express routes? Because I saw that, you know, there were a lot of like different things that would come up.
Like yeah, so the syntax is SQL syntaxes. Then what you use to pass it, it may be different, because this method, this DB method, is the one that we created. But then the original one from Node, it's the one that this helper function uses. So it should be something like this, that you use the MySQL package that comes with Node, and then you create the connection, and then you use something that's called query. And so you may find that the syntaxes depends on the solution that you found is a bit different, but the query part, so the string, the SQL string, it should be the same on all. So you can look on SQL Node, and the query should be the same.
And when you see this like method post, method put, what is that exactly?
This part. So where you define which method you will use is this part here,
Okay.
or which one
But
do you
when
refer to?
yeah, when it's written like method in capital letters, post. Like-
This one is on the front end, on the fetch.
Okay, that's for the fetch. Okay.
So this will be on the fetch that we will do. I think you did some example with Joy
Yeah.
on, where do I have this? I have it somewhere. You did some example with Joy with the fetch that you prepared the options. Let me check. So we will see that today as well. So this one, you mean? So this is on the front end. It's where you prepare the fetch that will ask the server for data. And we will see this again today. So that you prepare the options part, that is if it is a post or a put, and then you pass also the body with the data, and then you do the fetch and you wait for the server to respond.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me see, because we have, yeah, there are so many different small pieces to connect with when you work with a full stack. So let's see. Coming back to what we had, we downloaded this, we saw how to kind of install it. First, we go to the server. So let me clear the console here. So first we are in the server directory. We do here an npm install to install the packages that the server needs. And with npm start, the server start, the backend part. And then if we wanted to start the front end, which is in the client folder, we will see this today because we have not dealt with the front end yet, but then we will need to go to the client folder, install here as well the packages and the dependencies. We did this already, and the node modules folder is created. And then also npm start to start the front end. And this would pop up a page that right now it's not really functional because we don't have this connected yet, like doing something, this fetch part that we will do today. And so the local host runs on 3000, the backend, the server runs on the 5000. And so the local host, through its configuration, connects to the backend, to the 5000 port. If we want to test the server without using the client, so the client, I could actually stop now because we have not done anything with the client, so I can stop. And we can check it with the Postman for now. So here we can check the different methods. And by writing localhost 5000 and the routes that we want to test, in my case it's 5001 because I had to change the port. But here we can test the different methods before actually going to the front end. And that's what we were doing on Monday. So all the methods and everything is in this API.js file, which was the one that you had to configure. So a quick reminder how it works on the app.js file, which is our main server file. We have here a first connection, so a first route that says that whatever starts with the /API, whatever route my server is going to get, a request for something that starts with /API, I'm going to forward this request to this API router file. And this API router file up here, I define that I'm going to get this API router from this API.js file that it's in routes API.js. So that means that whatever starts with /API, I'm going to get into here and continue the routes from here. So for this, we use this express router, and we have the routes as we had it last week, just instead of app.get, app.post, we use router.get, router.post, router.delete. And so this part was already created for you. You had to fill the post, the put, and the delete methods, basically. The get, I think it was done already. This was done. And we also did this extra one, get with a specific ID on Monday, just to complete this query. Delete some of this to have it a bit cleaner. So we can have also a quick reminder of how it works with a request and a response. All these methods in Node.js, they get two arguments, they get a request and they create a response. So the request is the request, the HTTP request that comes from the client. It can be from a browser if I have a front-end running, or it can be from Postman. Postman, in this case, it acts like a client and it sends a request to the server. So when I do this, I'm sending a request to the server for a post to post some data to this URL. So either if it is from a Postman or from a browser, these all are considered clients. A request will come, and the request has different parts. It has a header, it has a body, and it also has one part that it's part of the URL. So if here I add, for example, the get method that we have already running, to-dos and some number, an ID. So I get back some response, I get this, this information from this item. So what I want to say is that this part here, whatever is on the URL, it's considered part of the request parameters. So I can capture this if I have the URL set correctly. So to expect something to be part of the URL parameters, and I can capture this by using rec.parameters, rec.params. So this object rec.params includes whatever comes in the request in the after here the slashes with this colon. So if here I define that I will be expecting an ID, I'm calling it to-do ID, then that means that I can capture this ID from the request.parameters. If I want to add something that it's not part of the URL like this, but it is as a query. So let's say that I have a query, text, and something. So this part that comes after the question mark, remember we did this also when we studied the ABAs, is part of query parameters. So if I wanted to capture this part here, I would need to use what it's called rec.query. So with rec.query.text, in this case, I could capture whatever the user has passed up here on the query part. The query part is after the question mark. And this all will be retrieved on the request.query object. So the request has different parts. If we console log request, we can see all of them. So one is the parameters, that it's part of the URL, it's considered part of the URL, and they can be defined like this with a colon and whatever we expect for the user to add here. And then if it's after the question mark, this will be stored in the rec.query, and I can also access that part. Normally we leave this part after the query for something that is more of a filtering or specifying further our query. So the important stuff, the one that it's actually like needed for doing the query, so the ID of the item I'm going to retrieve is very important, and I put it here. Now, if I want the order to be ascending or descending, or if I want to filter for something else, so if I have 30 results, I just want to take the first 10 of them. So this kind of smaller filters and query details, I can pass in the query part. Normally, we use the query part for this. And then there is another part where we also can get the bulk amount of data, which is the body. So when, especially on the get, we don't have any body because the get retrieves data. But if I have a post request, then together with my post request, I need to go here on the body, and I say that I have this JSON format of data, and I add here all the information that I want to pass to the server to process. Like if I want to post or to update, even if it is one item, if there are many items, I would send here an array of items. And so all this more bigger amount of data will be stored in the body, cannot be stored here. So I don't have ////, it will make my URL very big. And also whatever I have in the URL, it's normally more visible, easier, so they can be intercepted when they travel and can be seen like clear text. So if, for example, I have more sensitive data, like a password or some other, the email or the user information. So imagine a form like a registration form, and you have lots of information, address, telephone, email, all the personal information. All this will be stored, will be passed here on the body, because then it doesn't pass as visible as it will pass here as if it was in the URL. And so this part that is on the body, we capture them, as it says here as well, on the rec.body. So this is the third part of the request that also contains data. Okay, so we have the rec.params, and we have the rec.query, and then we have also the rec.body. So depends on what type of data we're searching for, it can be found in different places. The most common is that rec.params includes things like that specify the URL, specify the API. It makes the API very concrete, that I'm going to search for something with a concrete ID or with a concrete name, or yes, for example, with a concrete title. So what I'm searching for is here. The request.query includes secondary data that more filter or specify further a request or use in pagination or something. And then the request.body is where all our bulk data from a form will be sent to the server. So we will be using all of them. In this case, for example, in the get, we used the rec.params to capture the ID, to get access to this to-do ID that was part of the URL. So when I do a get API to-dos one, then I specify here which ID I want. In this case, body actually is not sent, it's sent, it's empty. Even if it's sent, it's ignored, because on the get, I don't need any body. I just want to retrieve information. So here we use this. Let's try to do the post then, and see how we could do this using the rec.body to get the information that we want to send, which, since it is a to-do item, will have the text and whether it's a complete or not complete item, these two items. Question on the request parts?
Thanks for going over those. I was confused, I guess, by like those three different ones and kind of which ones we should use, but thanks for going over that.
Sometimes it is a bit not confusing, but you may doubt it's not one that is correct or no. So especially between params and query, some things you will find them in the query part, and maybe on the params part, it's still on the URL. So it depends if it is after the question mark or like before the question mark. And this is more of a design decision or how you want to deal with it. If something you want to insert it in the URL or you want to leave it as the query part. So the query part is optional, because also you see here when we define the URLs, the query is not here. So the user should be actually able to skip the query part. So it's not needed 100%. Here, even if I had some query parameters, I wouldn't have to like order. I don't have to define it in here, so that after the query, I will also be expecting a parameter for order ascending or descending. And then even if this comes, I can deal with it with a params query, but it's not part of the main API route. So I'm going to use some of your code to check also and see if we have something like not working or something. So let me check. So this one I get from Gabriela. I start from you. So for the post part. So how do we deal with the post? First, we have to get from the request body what we expect to have sent to us, to the server, as a post request. So here we could either have only the text, or we can have the text and the complete, if it is true or false. Or we may have that the complete, we have a default value always to 0 at the beginning, so I don't need to get it from the body. This depends on us, but I could actually add also the complete to have it more complete. And then this will be part of the request body object. So this is a nice way of doing it. It is structuring the body and taking the two things that I need. Remember that this is also equivalent as later using record body text directly in here. It's just that I have to repeat record body. So if I don't want to repeat it, I directly extract the two things in two separate variables. And I directly use here text. So this is actually the same as saying const text equals rec.body text. And then I can use text here. Okay, the destructuring, we have seen it. And so we prepare the SQL. You can write it directly inside the method as we did here. So here with the DB method, we wrote the SQL string directly in here, or you can write it before. This is also a clear way, because also sometimes the SQL string gets very long. So as not to have everything mixed, we can prepare our SQL string. And in this case, since it is a post method, we will be inserting data. So we are going to use the insert into command. We specify the table. So our table is items. And we specify which things we want to insert, which fields. So it's text and complete. Also, I'm going to be inserting in the items table in text and complete fields the values that I got from the body. One of them is the text value, and the other one is the complete value. And here I don't put this in between quotes, because this is going to be translated to a number. So it's a number and it doesn't have to be treated as a string. So this is my SQL query. And then I can, this DB method, it's an asynchronous method, it returns a promise. So I have to deal with it with an await syntaxes or with a dot then. I think here we have both ways. We have db.then.catch or await db and then inside the try catch block. So both ways work. We use this DB method to run this SQL, and we await for this to finish. And then we could actually, so let me just put this in comment. So this is done, and we could actually just send back some okay, done, because this query doesn't return anything, even if I want to capture the result of this query and then maybe send back the result. The insert doesn't return anything. It will just return that the item was inserted, so like an okay. And if I send back the result with this, I'm probably not going to be able to see anything. But for now, it's a good step. At least if I can try it and see if I get any error or something. So for trying it, I'm going to go here on the post. The URL, it's going to be /todos with nothing afterwards. So it is /API. The /API comes from what I have said here on the app.js file, the main server, and then /todos is how it continues. And now here I do need a body part. So I go body, row, JSON, and I add a new item. And the complete, if it is true or false, or step one, I can also add false. It recognizes it here on the JSON. And if I click send, then this was okay, it was inserted, just that the return thing that I have from the operation, it's an empty array, so I cannot see anything. If I want to see that it's actually here, I can do two things. I can go in my MySQL server, use to-dos, it's the database, and then select all from items. And this one is the one that I have just inserted, a new item with a 0 for complete, so it is not complete. So one way it would be to manually check it on the MySQL, but an even better way is to make this same method return, do this select all from items and return all the items to the postman. So after I get the result, I don't really need the first result because the first result was an empty array, so I can skip it. And then after this, I run a second query to select all items, and then I pass back as a response to this operation all these items that I have got from the select, so that I can check it. So if I run the same thing again, and so now the response that I get is all the items. And I can double check that I see that it's inserted correctly with the information that I have passed. In fact, if I wanted to be even more correct, this should also be inside a try-catch block because it's still an asynchronous operation. It may give an error. So same as this could give some connection error, this can also give a connection error. So I should also nest it here, a try-catch block. But I will refactor it a bit later and move this to a different function outside so that we also call this always and have it a bit clearer. For now, it's good as it is here. So questions on the post method and on this insert. If the post, so in each case, when we create a server and an API, we have to remember that there will be a front end somewhere, and we need to let know the front end what we will be expecting from it. That's why we have this API documentation all the time that defines exactly what you need to put inside. So for example, this post is expecting a text and a complete. If I don't pass a complete, it may trigger an error. So if I just pass the text, because the front end only passes a text, and I try to send this, it will give me an error because it will find some undefined for the other part that is missing. So I'm not creating a very generic post that can work for anything. I'm creating a very concrete method that expects a text and a complete from the front end, either if it is a browser or the postman. And the opposite as well, if I just want the text, then I simply cannot use, this will not trigger an error. So if I just want to use text, and I have this as Gabriela had it at the beginning, I could have it like this, and even if the post sends both things, I use just one. So this doesn't trigger an error, but just remember, because then we will need it when we do the front end, that we need to double check what the backend is expecting, because the front end needs to send the same things that the backend is expecting. And if the backend expects something called text, on the front end, we cannot call it to-do item, because the backend expects something called text. So then we need to have this in mind for when we start working with the front end now. Okay, so for the puts, let me check. I'm going to see this. Did this work exactly on yours, or you also had an issue with this? Maybe it was the double quotes, the quotes. Let
It
me
didn't
check
work,
it.
but I took off the quotes off the complete and then it seemed to
No.
be working.
Ah, nice. Okay. So on the put method, missing something. So here, since it is an await, it has await here. Remember that this means that the function also needs to be asynchronous. So I need to specify that this function is asynchronous if I'm going to use await in here. Okay, so again, on the put, we will be expecting some body. It can be both things. It can be only one. Depends what we want this put method to do. So what the frontend will be doing. If we imagine that we have a to-do list and that we have like just a check for either if the item is completed or not, maybe the only thing that we want to do with put is to update the complete thing, so that we don't actually change the text. So we're not updating the text of the to-do. We just update its status. So maybe we just expect the complete part from the frontend that it will change from true to false. Or maybe we want the user to have the opportunity to also modify the text because it did some error. And so we want to also have the text updated. So this depends on the functionality that we have. And then depending on that functionality, we will do the backend as well, or the opposite. So depending on the backend, we will do the frontend. So what the backend offers, we will do the frontend as well. In any case, let's imagine that we wanted to update both things. Then we get the ID of the item that we want to change. We get it from the request parameters here. So it's from rec params.todoID. The two other items, the fields that we want to update, we get them from the body. So rec.body. And then the SQL syntaxes, in this case, we use the update method, update the table items, and then set text to this text and the complete to this value, whatever we got as a value, with the condition where ID equals to this ID. So I'm updating just this item with this ID. And then the rest is the same. I run the SQL, and then I wait for this to finish. If it is correct, I continue and I select all, just to then have some results shown to me, because also update would not give back any results on its own. And then if not, I send some error message. And so let's try to run it. I put in, I need to specify which item I want. So let's say to do change item, and then maybe complete, I set it to true. I can pass also here 1 if I want to pass a number. And so it seemed to have worked, and I have this second item with ID 2 changed to this text and to this status. Okay, so it's exactly the same as before. The only thing that changed is this line, the update instead of insert into. So in this case, we update something. And then let me see someone else to check the delete. The delete is again quite similar. We have to first get the ID from the params to do ID. Let me check this one from Mele. So you will see already that this means that I'm forgetting something, and I have to put here the async. So for the delete method, we get the ID from, again, request params to do ID. Here, the DB, the query, we can write it also in here inside the method. We are using the delete from, delete from, it's called, we specify from which table, and which item we want to delete by specifying a condition with a where ID equals the ID. And then we can send back just the message that the task was deleted, or repeat this and again send back all the items. So select, so that I can check that the item was selected. So after this, I should send back all the items. So let me delete. In this case, the body is not used on the delete because I just delete based on the ID. So actually I can simply have no body at all. And delete item 2. I get back all the items and I see that the number 2 is not in here, so it was correctly deleted. And I also get the 200 OK status. So this is not actually necessary, but it's not an issue also to have it. A request params to do ID, this will also always be a string. Even if the ID, I put it on the URL and it's a number, it's treated as a string. So when we get it on the rec params, it will be a string. But then here it's not an issue because it will be automatically translated to a number if we don't put it in between quotes. So if you put the string, but that it has a number format, it will take it as a number. But it's also good like this, that it's a good thing to have this in mind as well. So that this change between types that are needed, so that we know that this part here, even if we consider it a number, it's never a number when it's part of the parameters, it's always a string. Okay, so one thing that we could do now, since we are repeating all the time this select, 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 we could create a method or a function, as you want to call it. So I will call it get items. And in fact, we also pass the request and response to this. And these get items will be actually doing this part, the select. First, I'm going to copy it here. So it is an asynchronous function that does just the select all and returns the result.data. I will just put this also in here. And since this is a async await, it's even better if I put it in a try catch. Request sent 500, no, status 500. No request response, sorry, send error message. So this get items just does a select, and if everything is correct, we'll send as a response the data. If not, we'll send some message. So I can use this get items wherever I need it. So for example, here on the post, after I do my main query, then instead of this, I call get items and I pass the request and the response, so that then the continuation of sending the response back to the client will happen there. This I'm going to leave it because this is for this SQL. Okay, this catch error. So there can be two parts where there is an error. One when I try to do this query, and the other one is for the select all. So I can remove also this and replace with get items. Request response. And the same also here. And let's check. It works and it gives me back all the all the data. or if I try to request some item that doesn't exist, I get some error. Okay, so so what else? Then from the server part, I think with APIs we are done. Remember that we need this .env file where we define our parameters for the database. In general, this .env file, we will use it for other things as well. So this .env means environmental because it's called environmental parameters, the ones that are defined like global parameters from the server. And this, for example, we could specify here the port number. So instead of manually going in here and changing it to 5001, etc., we could have it, as it says here, in this variable. So in fact, if I go to define port, and let's say I change my port to 2000, then if I restart my server, now my server is running on 2000 basically. Let me check. This gives me an error because now it's not on 5000 and I should go on 2002 to get the server. So I can define here other variables as well, not only the database variable. This .env file is useful for defining many things like these constant variables that will be used globally. And so that then I can modify them easier here. And this is a file that is not going to be uploaded on GitHub. So if, for example, I upload the project and you want to download it to use it, you will have to create your own .env file and you put your own information, like, for example, your own username and password, because I have mine and I don't upload it on GitHub because no, I don't want to show this information. And you see that this gitignore file where we put all the files that we don't want uploaded to GitHub, and one of the files that we don't want uploaded is this .env file. So this contains variables that I use locally here, but then I don't upload. And this .env file comes with one of the packages that are installed already on app.js. It's not shown here, it's shown on the package JSON. So just so that you know, this one, this package, the .env package, if you need to install it because it's not already there, is the one that creates this connection with a .env file. That's why it's also the package is called .env, and the file needs to be called .env with dot in front so that it works. So this package allows this configuration file. And other things we have here, we will see them when we start working with the front end, a couple of more things with a connection. Other questions or someone that did something different that you want to try, or that you had some error that we want to check? So I'm going to stop this one. And I'm going to open another one. So that's, we'll do a different one, the front end of a different one, so that then you can continue with the front end of the to-dos part. So let me show you. I think it's done here. I will remove it, but let me show you what we will try to do. So the structure is the same, exactly the same. I actually copied the one and just replaced it with some of the files. It has some different routes because it is a movie app, and I'll show you how it works. I start my server, and I'm going to also start my client. So it is kind of like a movie app, and you get some information from the database. So this is loaded, the image and the title and the information. And you can add a new movie if you like. So we'll have some kind of form to add this new movie, and you can make this a favorite or not a favorite, and you can also delete a movie from the database. So these 5 of things that we can do: load the data, update by setting favorite or not favorite, delete, and create some new entry for the data. The same thing that you can do with to-dos, and you can do with many more things. So for this, I need to have on the backend one route for getting data, one for posting, one for putting, and one for deleting, the same that we had here as well. And so the backend, I have it already ready because it's the same that we did. So for this, I created a movies database. So yes, let's check a bit the database. So databases, I think it's called Ghibli. So tables, just one table, movies, describe movies so that we can see the table structure. And it has an ID to specify the movie, a title, the image that will be the URL, and a favorite that it's true or false. So it's this tiny int will be just one number, 0 or 1, and the year of the movie, that it's also an integer. So these are the things that this table has. And in order to create a table, you can come in here and create it with the normal SQL command, as we have seen on Monday. Or you could run, as we did, this database file where it creates this table. So well, drop table if exists, so that it doesn't give, the creation doesn't give any error in case the table is already created, and create table with this structure. Create table movies that has an ID, that has these parameters, a title, an image, etc. So here I pass the URL of the table that I want to create it. Not the URL, sorry, the SQL command. And so when I run this database, you saw we can run it with node model database JS. It connects to my database and it creates this table so that I have it ready for the rest. And I have also inserted some data from movies, it's called. So I have 1, 2, 3. And in fact, here I have like a helper file. It is this table that I want to create. I have like tested before in SQL before I try to pass it on the node. So you can also like run it directly on the MySQL client to make sure that it works and you don't have any error before you try to pass it in this database file. And also I have some insert with these movies so that I can easily load with some initial data. So now even if I went to the file and delete them all. So let's say that I delete. So of course, if I delete, even if I reload the page now, the data doesn't come up because it's not an array that's as we had in the previous versions, so that there is a local array that every time I load the page, the data starts from 0. Now, the changes I have done, they are permanent, they are on the database. So if I want to add again the movies, I need to insert them either from the form here, or I can simply run this command that I have to insert easily some like initial data. So if I come here to MySQL, now it's empty. And if I run the insert into, I get again the movies inserted. And now if I reload, I can see them. Okay, so then the API, the route that I have, the structure is the same. They start with the word API on the front. I did not change anything here, so I kept the same as you have it. And then instead of to-dos, my route start with movies. So get movies, it does a select all from movies, and it returns all the movies. A post movie, it will insert into the movies the title, the image, the favorite yes or no, and the year. It's the same query that you had. It's an insert into. The put will update just the favorite. So in my case, I'm just using put to update the status, if it is a favorite or not a favorite. And the delete will delete this movie. So let's see how we set up the front end then. So on the client page, we have, on the client folder, we have the basic structure of React, can be also Vue, but we will be working with React. And here we can have our app.js and components if we like. So my app.js, let me try to create a new one so that we start from 0. Let me, this one I will rename. And I will use this one. So then here is just React stuff, right? So we need to start, let me copy some of them. Import React from React, and then import use effect and use state, because I will be using them. I'm also importing the styles, and then I create this function app that I will be later exporting. Let me check, because then it's then that's the typical. Now you will be confused with on the backend it's module exports, and here on the front end it's export default. So there is a different way of exporting on one and on the other. So here with module export default function app, and so on this application, I want to have some items loaded. The first thing I will do then is to try to load these items and store them to some state variable. So we'll create a state variable that will be an empty array. And I'm going to create a function to fetch movies. And let me also create the return part. For now, just some div. So I will try to fetch movies from the backend, and then when I fetch them, I will be storing them in the movies. So then, since if everything goes correctly, it will be stored on the movies. So then I just have to here create some kind of grid of a list with my movies. And so let's say I'm going to have some grid, and inside I'm going to map the movie items. So movies map, and for each item, for each movie, I will actually call it movie. So for each movie, I'm going to be creating a new div. that contains, let's say it just contains the image with the source being the movie. Sorry. So this here, and then here, the source is the movie.image. So from these movies that I will be fetching from the backend, they have this structure that we have seen on the table. So we can check it again. If here on my SQL, I describe movies, there will be one field that is called image that I will be getting back from the data when I get this data back from the server. And this image is what it holds the URL. So I can use this image as a source to show the images when I have my data. So how the fetch is done on the backend. In order to do the fetch, we use fetch, and I need to specify the URL. If there was a different API, I would need to specify HTTP, as we have done with open, weather, map, etc., blah, 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 all the structure, all the URL. Here, since the server is located actually in this same domain and in this same, in the same host, let's say, in the same laptop, I can specify only the part of the domain that it is coming after the port, after the local host 5000, because this is like a common domain. And then I can specify the URL that will continue from there. So when we were checking these movies, this is actually posted in 5001, I think. Let me check. Okay, yeah, so I have them here. So this is the part that I'm going to put on my fetch, the API/movies, the one that comes after the port. So the first part, the localhost 5001, I don't need to specify because I set it somewhere else. And where do I set this? On the client folder, on package.json, there is a line at the end that says proxy, and it has the address, the URL of the server. So that means that all requests will be proxied to this server. So whatever request I'm going to be doing, unless it is for a totally different URL. So if I want to also here use the open weather map for also showing the weather, then okay, I can specify the whole URL starting from HTTP and we'll go there. But if I don't specify to which server it goes and I just specify like how the API continues, then this will be proxied to that server. So I don't need to specify the whole URLs here. I just do fetch like this. And then instead of .10, I will do the async. So this will be an asynchronous function, and I will await the fetch. And then if this is correct, I will also await for transforming the results of the fetch to JSON. Remember that with fetch, we have this particularity that the results are in a stream format. It's not readable, so we have to transform them to JSON. So we get the data, and then we transform with .json to actual data. And then I'm going to set my movies to this data that I have got. So I will update this state variable, the movies, to this data that the fetch has returned. Okay, and all this needs to go inside the try catch. To also catch any errors. And for now, just console log. Okay. And we'll see how to deal with this. So this would be a very simple version of my fetch. And you will see now that this is not called anywhere. So you can see that it's in this gray format. So even when I load the page, the fetch is not called. As we have discussed, we have this use effect hook that it's one of its uses is to load data to do the connection with the server when we first start our app. So we will use the use effect. And let me just copy the syntaxes because there are some so it's use effect, it's, or try to do it like this, and an empty array. If we add an empty array, that means that it will be called only at the beginning on load. And inside the use effect, I'm going to call the fetch movies. So that means that it will do the fetching when the server starts. Okay, let's see. Probably it will not work from scratch, but let's see what we have. Some errors. M is not defined. Where do I have M? 35. Okay. Let's see. Console was clear. Expected and unexpected, non-used. Okay, I have the title, but current process is not defined. App.js 126. Let me also console log here the data, just to see at least that we get something back from the fetch. Okay, so the fetch is working and we get our data back. And it's this array, and we store it on the movies. Expected an assignment or function instead non-used expression. So at least the first thing is done, but where is this error coming from? I have here this. So 27. So it doesn't like this part here. Let me check on my cheat sheet. I have it here with another component. So later you can also refactor it. So I changed this to a different component. Let me copy the map from here. So I'm going to copy this map and see if the issue is on the map, because also it has some format and everything. I copied with the map, yes. Okay. Okay. So nice, I have this, just that not on the correct format. I need to load the CSS correctly. And also there are some functions missing. So the add favorite, the on delete, so I will redo this later. But so I have the movies at least loaded and the first fetch is done. And this fetch, I will fix the styling later. So this first fetch is talking to my server, and it's getting the movies, all movies. Since it is a fetch that we don't specify any method, so I don't say that it's a post, put, or delete. By default, this is a get method. So the fetch, if I do it like this, very simple, it's a get, and it goes to the movie apps. And in fact, if I check back on my server, I get some messages that indicate that I got a request for get/API movies. So on the server, I can also see some messages that I cannot see on the console. The console is just what it's happening on the front end, on the client. The server error or non-error messages or console logs, I need to check them on the console of the server. And so I see that it was connected and I got a request for this and I responded with the data. Okay, so I got the first part and I got these movies fetched. Any questions on this first? So how we used it with the use effect or how we use the fetch? Let me check. This is class name. It's called container. Okay. And then the movie grid, just to check it's container grid, container. So yes, the styling is a bit different, but container grid. And I have one more book here. And still, okay. I'll fix it. I think I need another div, like the container div as well. Somewhere, I think I had the container div. Container. Oh, it's a class name container. Okay. Container and the movie grid. So the movie grid here, in this case, I had created a different component. We will refactor it later to move it to a different component. But for starting, you can also have it in the same one. Class and container, and then in here. Okay. Just that it's sent. And they have the things that are not. So before going to the other things, the post, the put, the fetch, etc. Let me do a reminder. We will have a break also now so that we don't have everything together. Just a quick reminder how fetch works. As I was saying, if we don't specify anything like this, it's a simple fetch, it's a get. Then if instead we want to do a post or a put or a delete, what we have to do is to create, apart from writing on the fetch part the URL, the API that we are going to be accessing, we pass an options object. And in this options object, we need to first specify the method. So we write here method post, method put, method delete. We specify the headers. So what type of information we will be setting, in which format. So that indicates that the content type, the format that is coming next on the body, it's on a JSON format. And then we also add the actual body. So we have a body part, and in here we are passing some info. The info can be a whole user object, can be just the favorite thing that has been moved from true to false, whatever information we want to pass. This is the information that we want to pass. In this case, this makes a reference to a variable that holds the user information. The things that we need to use this JSON stringify method to transform this to a valid JSON as well, because this can be an object or an array, JavaScript object or JavaScript array, but we change it to a JSON format by using the JSON stringify. So with no dot here. So we build this options object and we pass it together with the fetch, and that will allow us to do the post method or the get or the delete or the put, same as we were doing with the postman. The delete, in fact, doesn't need anybody, because when we delete, normally we specify like which ID we want to delete up here on the fetch. So we will be passing the ID of the object that we want to delete, but it still needs the options method because we need to specify that the method is delete. If I don't put anything, by default, the method is a get. So if I don't pass an options, this fetch will retrieve a user with this ID, as if it was a fetch user with this ID. Okay, we will put this in practice now. So we will assign things to different functions. This is like our main one to get the movies, and we call it at the beginning, but we can call it also in other moments if we want. And then we will create now the ones that are for deleting and for updating, etc. But let's take 10 minutes break and we'll continue with building the front end.